Hello, welcome back. Yes, we're dealing with monsters, and this is a request from one of my patrons and subscribers, and the swarm of insects is on the card. I didn't think I'd be dealing with swarms of insects anytime soon, but today's the day. So we're going to look at that in particular. So I'm going to put up a poll so that you can take part in that poll. I'm also going to, as it happens, work through not just the swarm insect, but I'm going to do the variations. I'm going to do 3 variations. So grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and I'm going to get started very, very soon, okay? And we'll get into this very fast. I should be able to get this done, I suspect, in a fairly swift amount of time. So let's get moving, shall we? Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about tabletop role-playing games, Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we're going to look at the monster, the swarm of insects, which can be made up of spiders, centipedes, beetles, and wasps. And that is what we're going to deal with today. We're going to look at that, going to break it down, going to fix it, because I do think it needs some adjustment, and that should be able to get done in, I would say, about an hour. I don't think it's going to take me that long. I could be wrong. I have been wrong before, but I think I can get it done in that time frame. Now, I'm going to apologise now. My my body is suffering as we go through winter into spring, and then spring into summer, and so I'm starting to sound a little bit weird. I do apologise. There's not much I can do. So let's look at the maths behind this. I have already prepared a document for it, so I should be able to get it all done in a swift amount of time. And we'll look at this right now. Okay. And I see we have in chat a couple of people. I'll just acknowledge them very quickly, and then when we get started, I will be looking at chat, but I will be working through the maths fast. Fred Huber, patron, thank you for being here. Nacho Man, also a patron, thank you for being here. Derp, also a patron. And the brainchild, let's do the swarm of insect. And Peter, hello. Yes, it needs fixing. Let's get it done, shall we? Okay, so I'm going to take the Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master Guide. Now I can't use the new Dungeon Master Guide because the new Dungeon Master Guide doesn't have it set up. That you can't actually do what you would normally be able to do, unfortunately. That's one of the hassles with the new Dungeon Master Guide, is it? It's not really there. So I have to use the old one, which just happens to be right beside me. I have page marked it. You can see there's a couple of page marks in here. I've been working on stuff recently, mostly magic items and stuff like that. But on page 274, we have a sort of a breakdown, the quick stat block breakdown, which I probably should fix because it needs fixing. This one in here is not actually that accurate. But anyway, I'm going to go through this. It is actually the 20th today, not the 21st. So maybe I just got my dates out of alignment. Okay, so most of this I have copied over from the original stat block here. It is a half challenge rating, so it's not really a full-blown challenge rating, so it's not intended to be a really tough or strong monster. But even so, it should have a proficiency bonus of +2, which it does have. You know, challenge rating I'm not going to change. I want to leave that the same. Its experience points, all cool. Okay, we don't have any problem with that. But now we'll look at armor class. Armor class for most things, unless it's a challenge rating 0, should be at least a 13. But we can adjust that number by 1 point. And this is one of those times where I actually think that's perfectly reasonable to change it by 1 point. If we change it by 2, we would change the bracket of monster that it's sitting in. Now, even though challenge rating is really kind of just a guide and kind of like a lot of garbage too, because there are a lot of factors that contribute to whether your challenge rating is going to work or not. I've taken the hat off, guys. I'll put it down there. So how do we make this work? Well, I'm going to just drop it down a little bit because I think that I don't want the armor class to be too high just yet. But there's another problem too with doing that, is we've got a huge problem with the amount of damage that or the ability for a swarm of insects to hit a target. It should not be hard. I have been stung by swarms of wasps before. It is not difficult for a swarm of wasps to sting you. Trying to avoid getting hit by swarms of wasps, wasp swarm is impossible. And it's just, and you can flail your arms around all you like. You can run as fast as you like. It doesn't matter. So that's wasps. Spiders, I've never had to deal with swarms of spiders, but I know there are spiders out there that move fast. The problem with the swarm of insects stat block is it's trying to duplicate 4 different types of creatures. So it's trying to be a shorthand, and this is where our problem lies. So right now, let's say it's a 12, I'm going to leave it. But I suspect I'm going to have to come back and change that to a 13 because there's a couple of things that we definitely need to address. Okay, right, now going down this list here, its hit points are listed as being, well, we've got a maximum of 40 hit points. Average is 22, which is not very many. And really, for our challenge rating of 1/2, we should be seeing hit points of 50 to 60. Now, you might be thinking, that sounds like a lot. No, it's not. Because you'll be level 1 when you're facing these. If you're a higher level, you're going to find it easier. But a level 1 character and having, everybody take their turn, most characters are going to do roughly between, 5 to 10 points of damage. So this means that you're probably going to get maybe 2 rounds and then the swarm of wasps is gone. If everybody does about 5 or 6 points of damage at low level, at first level, then that means that you'll find that there's probably about 25 hit points gone in the first round of combat with the player characters. And then after that, they'll wipe it out in the second round. So 2 rounds of combat and it's gone. Right now, we're not even going to get 1 round. You'd be lucky to get to the bottom of the round with 22 on average. So this is a problem. We have to push this up. And the easiest way to do that is to change some of our numbers here. So we're going to do that. Remember, hit points are a timer. They aren't set in concrete. They aren't physics. They are a timer for how long we want a monster to work and do its thing before it's wiped out. Okay? All right, so first things first, I'm going to take this and I want to include enough hit points to make it work. So I want to push it up at least to 50. At least to 50. So I feel like 5 won't be enough. 6 will only get me to 48. So if I gave 7, we should get there. Okay, so if I go here and I go 7 times 8 will give me 56. That is my new number, 56. That is the top number of hit points. And then the average, well, that would be 4.5, the average of 8, and then we multiply that by 7. And we should get 31. 31, so 31 on average. I would recommend using the maximum hit points that a monster has. There's a reason why I always do monsters in a range rather than as one static number. It is because a Dungeon Master should pick the level that they think their group can handle. Okay. Next. Insect Swarm is broken up into 20 feet, climbing 20 feet. Okay, we're not going to change this. This is just a generic one. Here's where our problem lies. We have to decide with our insect swarms, whether that's bugs, wasps, centipedes or spiders, what they're going to be hitting with. And if it is going to be strength, then that's a -4. If we're using dex, that's a +1. And right now, it's going to be a huge problem because neither of those numbers are particularly high. I don't have a problem with the constitution. I actually don't have a problem with the strength. I don't think a swarm of insects should be stronger. I don't think they should be more intelligent. I don't think their wisdom should be higher. I don't think their charisma should be higher. I'm fine with all of those. But there's a real problem with looking at dexterity as this. Not just to hit them, but more importantly, to strike a target. I believe that dexterity or strength should be able to be used interchangeably with natural weapons or your fists. It shouldn't just be a monk thing. Okay, so this is how I'm going to build it. And yeah, I'm going to be working on that in a second. But so let's have a look at what else we need to address. You'll notice the monster itself has some damage resistance. Bludgeoning, piercing, slashing is on here. Bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. It wasn't originally in, I think, the monster manual when I got, the original monster manual back in the day. I think they've made an adjustment. It might have been excluded. So bludgeoning, I don't know that they necessarily need to have resistance to this. If anything, I feel like bludgeoning is more likely to be effective. I think that's why I've highlighted it. They added bludgeoning as like a damage resistance. And I don't know that if you squash a swarm of spiders and other insects, you're probably going to do more damage than if you try to pierce them or slash them. So this here, I'm going to ditch. We're going to take that off. We're going to get rid of the bludgeoning as something that they have damage resistance to. Okay? We want them to use bludgeoning damage, if anything. The next thing is I've got here damage vulnerability to fire. That is actually supposed to only apply to flying insects that have wings. So for now, I'm going to address this one when I do the wasp. So I'm going to leave that in highlighted for now. And then in terms of condition immunities, well, we've got charmed, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and stunned. I think we got too many condition immunities. I am fine with having, what condition immunities make sense. Being charmed, is it because their brain is just not developed enough because they've got an intelligence of 1? I think that's what we were doing with here. Frightened, are bugs actually, is a swarm going to actually be frightened of something? Probably not. Can you grapple it? Not really. Can you paralyze it? There's so many of them. I think that's what they're trying to do here. Petrified, I do not understand why we have decided that petrified should not work. Petrified should work against a kraken. It should definitely work against a swarm. So I'm taking petrified out. I think that needs to go. Prone, you can't make them prone, and you can't really restrain them because there's too many of them. Being stunned, like, why? I don't understand why you've included stunned either. Those are my pet peeves currently in terms of the conditions. And you know that I'm not against adding condition immunities that are stunned, okay? But for the right monster. Passive perception, I've got an 18. It's not supposed to be an 18. I believe it's supposed to be an 8. Yeah, it's way down here. So it's an 8. So not an 18, 8. That's a little bit of an error. We'll get rid of that. Blind sight, 20 feet. Okay, so that depends on the monster you're dealing with. But I'm fine to stay with that. We're dealing with so many different types of creatures. They're using all sorts of sensors. They've got antennae. They're not necessarily using their eyes. They've got feelers on their body. So there's a lot of things going on. I think that's why they've gone with the blind sight. Okay, fine. Let's keep going down. Swarm. The swarm can occupy another creature's space and vice versa. And the swarm can move through any opening large enough for a tiny insect. The swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. So I'm actually perfectly fine with this trait. It's all right the way it is. Now let's look at the bite. What is the bite based off? Our proficiency bonus of +2, and then our +1 from dexterity, giving us a +3. But the problem is they're facing characters that will have at least a +5, which means that as a general rule, and I've found this to be the case, swarms don't really hit you. You're being swarmed, but they're not really biting you at all. Just because of how the game is built. And I think we need to, I've done this many times before. If we have a look at the half challenge rating, it says that the attack bonus should be a +3. But anything lower than a +5, unless it's a 0 level challenge rating, in other words, it's no challenge at all, it really doesn't matter what their attack bonus is, because it's not a combat monster. In fact, there's probably no point at all having a challenge rating 0 monster in the first place. I know we've got a scale here, but it's not a monster that's worthwhile making. And I always see a swarm of beetles completely pointless. I would never bother with it unless it's flesh-eating scarabs. Do you know what I mean? There's just no point. Centipedes, yes, because of poison. Wasp because of the sting, poison. Spiders bite, poison. Yes, and their sting. They've got a stinger sometimes too, quite often. So that's all fine. I have no problems with those 3 types. But I'm pushing this up. Now, if I push this up, it only makes sense that this number goes up as well. Okay? And that is probably what I'm going to do. In terms of damage output, we'll deal with that in a second. But right now, yeah, we're going to get back to the chat and see what they have to say. And then I'm going to continue on my merry way with this stat block. And I need to do this fast. Peter, yes. YouTube, Fred, and swarms of insects need fixing. Yes, they do. Yes, YouTube does need fixing. Fred does need fixing. And so do swarms of insects. Fred does. Yes, that's right. Thanks, Nacho. I appreciate your Hello, Overboard. How's it going, Joe? Joe is a moderator. Are there insects that make all these noises in the trees? I think they force a contest. Are you talking about the what do you call it? Cicadas or the grasshoppers? I think it's the cicadas you're talking about, right? Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make some changes to this because I think it needs it. Okay, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to start doing all of the 3 swarms that I think are actually important. So back to this. I'm getting rid of this petrified nonsense. Shouldn't be there. It's gone. I'm even tempted to get rid of paralyzed because I don't know why you wouldn't be able to paralyze something. Okay. Restrained doesn't make sense. Prone doesn't make sense. Stunned. Why can't you stun a swarm? Is there nothing? If you were to have an effect that does a stun, you can't stun it? If you got an argument or you know, something to put forward that you think makes sense, let me know if you think I've got this wrong. But I think this needs to change. Next, does this make the swarm weaker? Yeah, of course it does. Next, we need to make this a 16. Not a 15, but make it a 16. At the very least. Okay? And that means this becomes a 3, 5. That's better. And then we go through here, and then we look at one target in the swarm space, and that's fine. I have no problems with the reach. Okay, in the space, and then we do some damage. So the damage is 10 or 4d44, or 2d4 piercing damage if the swarm is at half its hit points or fewer. In other words, it does less damage the smaller the swarm is. And I have no problems with dealing with that way. That's all good. That's fine. What we need to address is that enough damage when it's at its maximum strength? The challenge rating half, is that enough? Now this says here, a half challenge rating should be between 6 and 8, and we've got 10. So we're actually a little bit higher. But then once you start smashing it, that will change. So I actually have no real reason to see that we need to change too much about that. But because we're using dexterity to hit, we probably need to use that for damage as well. And I think that makes sense. That will change our damage output though. So let's go here. Plus 3. Plus 3. Now, I know this is fundamentally different to what you're used to in the rules for 5e, but honestly, dexterity or strength should be used for natural weapons. It's finesse. Honestly, it should just be finessed. This changes the average output, though, doesn't it? Because by doing this, we now just increased our damage from 5 to 8. Okay. And then this one here just went up to 13. So that's way too much for a half challenge swarm. So now we have to look at trimming down something to make it all work. And so that's what we're going to do now. And I'll just bring this down. So I want to bring this down. If we can get as close to 8 as possible, I would be happy. So how do we do that? We can trim off probably 2 of these. 2d4 plus 3 would give us very close to where we need to be, I would say. So 2.5 is the average of a four-sided dice, multiplied by 2. Okay, that's 5, plus 3 equals 8. We're spot on. Spot on. How's that? 8. Which means that if we do the same thing with the 1d4 and trim that down, we should just about be right in the sweet spot. I know it's very unusual to see me decreasing the amount of damage a monster does, but sometimes it's more important to hit the target than to do damage. If you can never hit the target, you're never going to do the damage anyway. So this is where my head is at. 2.5, which is for the 1d4. Then we're going to add the 3. Gives us 5. So ultimately, in the end, our reduced to half damage is essentially the same. The formula is just different. That's it. But our maximum amount of damage we can do as a swarm is far more reduced. 8 points of damage is enough to take a wizard down at level 1. It will not probably kill the frontliners. But a sorcerer, a wizard, won't kill them, but it'll certainly mess up their day and put them down to 0 hit points. So it's still a very, very tough and dangerous monster. But you do still have another round, right? So, you know, if they get hit again, they lose another saving throw. They've still got 2 saving throws. Somebody's going to either heal them or leave them to die. Whatever is their preference. Okay, so that there, I would say, is a fairly solid swarm of insects. It'll last long enough, it will hit its target, and it will do the appropriate amount of damage needed. And we've got rid of there's a sort of laundry list of condition immunities that it really didn't need to have. And that is just the basic stat block. But we still got 3 other stat blocks to do, which we're going to do in a second. But before I do that, let's go back to chat. And, we've got some feedback in here. I think you can't stun because they are looking at individual insects getting stunned. But the swarm keeps going. I suppose you could say that. Swarms run on phenome, yes, chemical trails, and can be disrupted just by altering the trail that's laid. Conjure should be able to achieve some mischief against a swarm. Right, okay. All right, okay. So you want me to leave stunned in there? You reckon? Is there enough of you who... Look, what changes should I make to the swarm? What changes should I make to the swarm? Because I'm assuming that if you can stun something, it's probably from a spell. But I guess the idea being that if you were to punch it and you're a monk and you're using stunned, you can stun a swarm. And this is why they're adding that in. And it's what's the most common thing that'll stun? It'll be the monk, right? So, okay, fair enough. I can see that. I'll add it back in. And then I'm going to start working on the swarm of wasps and the other stuff as well. Okay? I was agreeing with most of this when you were brainstorming the Discord. Yeah, so I was brainstorming this with Derp and Fred Huber. So most of this I had already sort of discussed with them, basically. But no, I'll put the stunned back because I can see that the most common mechanic that we're going to come across is a monk stunning rather than a spell stunning. So that's all right. We'll put that back in. But other than that, I think that's close enough to where we need to be. And then we're going to start doing the other swarms. So where are we? Stunned. Is it and stunned or just stunned? Stunned. You would just list it. It's just a list. Okay, all right. But I got rid of the other one because I think petrified is something you should be able to petrify them. Yeah. If I wanted my basilisk or my what do you call it? Medusa to stun them, to petrify them and turn them to stone, I think that should be a thing. It doesn't matter what size monster the creature is, unless it's made of stone already. Doesn't make any sense then, but yeah, so there we go. Now, we'll take this insect swarm. I will copy it. So now that we have that, and down, I just deleted the whole thing. And then try again. Copy, go down, and paste. and paste. Okay, all right. So now I just need to make sure swarm of wasps. I'm going backwards, by the way, people. Wasps, and then oh, I almost forgot the armor class of our swarm, which I talked about before, was 12. It's now 13. That's going to be a factor. This here goes for the standard one. We'll delete that. I don't think that applies. Actually, do you know, now that I think about it, I think this should be bludgeoning. Vulnerability to bludgeoning for a swarm seems a reasonable thing. It's not bludgeoning. Blood. No, he doesn't even know what I'm talking about. Well, fair enough. Bludgeoning. Bludgeoning. Okay. All right. My brain has gone on holiday. Have I drunk enough tea? Maybe that's not... Maybe I haven't drunk enough tea. Bludgeoning. So I'm going to add bludgeoning in there. Paste that. Full stop. Bludgeoning vulnerable. And then... Okay, that's all fine. Swarm of insects. That becomes a 13. Because we're going to stay there. We're going to make that fire because we talked about that before with Derp and Fred Huber. But I also want to include in bludgeoning because I think that's an appropriate damage type. Bludgeoning, fire. Okay, the other things are fine. Okay, so we're going to go down here and now we probably need to consider the fact that piercing damage is... I almost feel like piercing damage is the wrong thing. Is it piercing damage or is it the poison? Because when I think about what hurt, it was not the sting and the piercing damage, it was the poison. And I don't want to separate the two. I think it actually should be poison. The swarm, as it is, as it stands, the standard swarm piercing is fine. But if we go to wasp, that's a different animal in itself, right? We're dealing with poison damage, I think. So let's go here and change this to poison. Now I just need to go over here. Hopefully I get this right. And I believe that our wasp, here we go. So there is a version of the wasp. And it's essentially the same. I don't think it's changed very much at all. Other than, oh, it's got a fly speed and it's got a land speed. And of course its hit points are about the same. So we're going to change its speed because that would be a factor. So we'll go back to here for our wasp. Where are you, wasp? Wasp. 5 feet. Fine with that. Fly speed. And was it 40 feet? I think it was. No, 30 feet. It's not that fast. Okay, 30 feet. I can tell you, I feel like wasps can fly pretty quick. Faster than I can run. Even when I was younger. Anyway, if you've ever been stung by a whole swarm of wasps, it's not a fun time. Or bees. Bees aren't fun either. Okay, so down here. And I think all of this is essentially the same, except for... And I want to keep the blind sight because a wasp has many different ways of detecting things. You know, its antennae is a big factor. It's not just its eyes. Its eyes aren't very good. I'm pretty sure wasp insect eyes aren't that great. 10 feet is... Its senses are pretty... It's not that far away. Do we need to go further? No, I feel like that's actually perfectly fine. If anybody has any disagreements, let me know. The damage that we do, though, that's one thing we definitely want to change, because I don't believe that a wasp, it's not the piercing damage that hurts. It's the sodding poison. Poison. Poison damage. No, poison damage. Poison damage. Poison damage. Poison. poison damage. Now there's another thing that we need to add in here, in my opinion, and that is the target also has the poisoned condition. Okay, we need to put that in there. I'm not going to put a time limit on how long the poison condition lasts. If I remember right, it took me about 2 weeks to recover from being stung by a swarm of wasps. It's a long time. It depends on how many stings you get, but if you're getting stung enough to take 8 points of poison damage, I think that's about equivalent to 8 wasps hitting you, and that ain't fun. I can tell you 8 is bad, 11 is worse, and 15 is you're going to be sleeping for a while, and you may need some antihistamines as well. So I think that's where it needs to sit for that one. Okay, so that's 2 done. We're going to do another one, which is the centipede. But before I do that, back to chat, just to make sure that people are feeling like I'm on the right track. So the great thing about doing this in live chat is sometimes I get some really good feedback that really points out something that I just didn't even think about that I should have considered, which is great. I would be for lowering the damage further and making them auto hit. Try blocking a swarm of bees with anything. Yeah, well, I suppose that's true. But I think mechanically, I'm just going to leave it as it is. I want there to be a chance that you could avoid them, even though it's kind of ridiculous. I totally agree with that. The reality is, once a swarm is after you, you really can't avoid them. I think swarms should be annoying but not deadly. Auto hit for lower damage. You can't do cannot deal with them. They can't go down on one turn. Well, I love wizards, but there's got to be something that takes the Sonic wizard down, because they're almost always never in harm's way, because they're always at the back line or standing behind cover. So yeah. But I see where you're going with this this thought. But I'm not going to go auto hit. The problem is that most people in the community who play Dungeons and Dragons, and most of the people who are playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e in particular, cannot accept and understand the concept of auto hitting with a monster. They would view that as the dungeon master cheating, or something being completely unfair. So this is not a problem in terms of, and the way you're thinking, Joe, is very sensible and logical in terms of how a swarm would work, and I would agree, but our community could not cope with it. They would have an embolism, and I don't want people to suffer in that way and wind up going to hospital as they have a stroke, okay? Negative space. Maybe they could be one of the creatures that instead of a damage roll, they deal damage of how much their attack roll past the target's armor class. Oh, this is very much like I've heard this mechanic before. It's an interesting idea, but it's so different to simulate how many found a place to bite or sting. This is so different to what the people are used to in terms of the general mechanics, that unless you're making your general mechanics operate this way, like I think Pathfinder works this way or something like that. And I think, is it DC 20 also has something like this as well? I think it would be too far of a stretch for most people to deal with. But interesting ideas, probably just not suitable for 5e. You could do that with Shadow Dark. You could definitely do that with Shadow Dark. I feel like you could people could handle that. Anyway, I'm putting that in. Let's do the next swarm, since I thought the swarm of wasps was a good idea. We've got that, we've got that, we've got that. I've got all the bits and pieces in place that we needed. So let's go back. Next, spiders. Now a swarm of spiders is a little different because there's a couple of things they should have added to them. A couple of features that are listed right here as it happens. The question is, in terms of armor class and attack roll, should I change too much? And so I was thinking really hard about how fast do spiders move. And like some spiders move very slowly and they'll only move across their web. And then there are other spiders that move much faster. So let's answer the question first. Have I got this on the right place? No. Sorry, people. So over here. So I've got the stat block up. I'm looking at swarms of spiders now because we're going to deal with these different features. I'm going to include them in a second. So we'll do a cut and a paste from our wasp and go spiders. Copy, paste. Okay, and then up, 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 up. There's our wasp again, and there's our wasp again. So we've got our copy there. That's the spider one. So I think probably the easiest way is to determine whether our spiders can move really quickly or not. The spider swarm, they say, moves 20 feet and can climb 20 feet, which is interesting. 20 feet. And then climb 20 feet. 20 feet. So slightly slower than a medium-sized creature that can do other things. How fast can they move? Well, look, if you've seen some spiders move really slowly and they just wait until something's stuck in the web, and others move really quickly. If we look at Australia, it gets really funky. Really, really funky. So I'm going to just go and get rid of the fire damage for the spiders because I feel like they wouldn't be vulnerable to fire. Piercing and slashing, resistance, absolutely. Bludgeoning, I think that would still squish them. And then in terms of like how fast do they move? Let's take that over here. How fast do spiders move? Okay, 1.9 kilometers per hour. Sorry for those of you who hate spiders and do not like pictures of them. The sun spider moves 16 kilometers an hour. Okay. How quick are spiders? That's really the big question. They are quick and nimble. In fact, they can skitter across the living room floor at a speed of up to half a meter per second, which is pretty quick. Wicked fast for a spider, but slow for a human. Okay. All right. So we've established a little bit about this. This is, look, Australia is probably the worst place to be looking in terms of house. That's a house spider, right? Top speed of spiders. Is a spider faster than a human? Okay. Australian huntsman, this is where I'm going, family, can run 40 body lengths per second, about 8 times faster than the fastest human runners. That is the spider I'm thinking about. The huntsman spider. Okay? Which is why I'm going to leave their dexterity as being fast. They are a scary, scary thing. You do not want to deal with those things. But that is the spider swarm that I would say is the spider swarm we want. Rather than thinking of the slowest and most ponderous spider there is. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to worry about them. You'd be able to just, oh, there's a big spider swarm. I'll just walk away because they're so slow, I can just take my time. But we're not dealing with that kind of spider. It's a dangerous spider. It's the huntsman swarm, okay? So that's why I'm not looking at the daddy long legs or the house spider or even the giant house spider. We're looking at the huntsman. So they move much, much faster. So now we can change how we deal with everything in terms of this. So let's go down here. This is, I just wanted to put that forward so people wouldn't going to get too upset when I made some changes with regard to the spider swarm. Dear. So the things I go through. Anyway, here we go. So let's add in, come here. Paste. And then bold underline. This is the spider climb. The swarm can, do I need to say spider swarm? I think we're just saying swarm, the swarm. The swarm can climb difficult surfaces, including upside down on the ceilings, without needing to make an ability check. Okay, so we've got that bit done. That's for our spider. And next we're going to do the web sense, because we should have webs as well. Pardon me. I'm pretty gassy, unfortunately. and then web sense, bold that. While in contact with the web, the swarm knows the exact location of any other creature in contact with the same web. Okay, got that as well. You'll start to see how there's a reason why I picked those 3 particular swarms and exclude the beetle, because the beetle's just like a waste of your time, really is. Here we go. And then web walker. Okay, bold. The swarm ignores movement restrictions caused by webbing. Okay. So we've got all of the basic traits that we need for our swarm of spiders. We don't need to shift our armor class because their armor class is determined by their speed. And as we've just determined, this is not household spiders. These are dangerous huntsman spiders that move bloody quickly. So, and you could argue that their dexterity is probably a lot higher than a 16. Could be as high as an 18, in fact. We could push that up and make the swarm of spiders significantly faster, actually. How do people feel about that? That would change their damage output for spiders, and it would change as it probably should be, and it would change their output in terms of how often they hit. That would be an interesting thing to do. This is something to consider. Okay. What about, look, so for example, in New Zealand, we have what is called the New Zealand bush spider. It's a huge thing. It's like the size of a dinner plate. And they eat birds and other things. And they will chase a human fairly easily. They can keep up with you, which is what's so terrifying about the little sods. And I've seen a few of them, but thankfully haven't been chased by them. So, yeah. You don't want to be bitten by those little sods because that hurts. They're not necessarily particularly poisonous, but they hurt. Hurt a lot. And they look terrible. They look horrible, like all spiders do, if you ask me. So I think that's possibly a consideration to look at. Like, how do we do that? I think that's probably one of the better ways to go about it. And then, in terms of damage, we don't have to change our damage at all. Our poison damage is right in line. Instead of piercing damage, poison damage, spiders, it should be poison damage, and the poison condition. So a lot of this could just essentially stay the same. It just comes down to, do we want to make our spider swarm a bit more dangerous? It could just be the same and be fine. And the only difference is we're dealing with spider climb, web sense, and web walk. Okay, so I'm going to do the next one in a second, which will be the centipedes. Now, the reason I decided that centipedes were a good idea is the poison and bite of a centipede is actually not very nice to experience. It's really, really nasty. So there's an additional factor to this. They have a walking speed and a climb speed, which is pretty comparable to everything else. There's not a lot that needs to be changed other than the fact that they poison you for a period of time and they cause paralysis as well. And this is pretty normal for centipedes, particularly the larger ones. And a tiny creature, you suppose you could say, it's a tiny creature, it shouldn't be like that. But even the tiny ones can be pretty nasty. It also depends on which part of the world and what centipede you're talking about, right? So let's just go over here and let's see what people have to say before I attack the centipede. And how are we doing for time? We're doing pretty well. Yes! If you want auto hits, Swarm becomes an AoE at low damage. Yeah, I know. AoE reduces as you whittle them down. Then save. Yeah, I think it's unnecessary. I think we leave that alone. I think that's something that I don't want to play with that because I just don't think people would be able to cope. As I said, our community is not fond of auto hitting monsters. Even if it makes sense. Remember, Dungeons and Dragons 5e, Dungeons and Dragons full stop, it's not a real life combat simulator. It is a tabletop role playing game. It is an abstraction. Hit points are abstraction. To hit is an abstraction. Damage is not damage. It's just loss of hit points. Damage doesn't mean you're taking wounds. It can mean all sorts of different things. So there's so many abstracts, so we don't need to deal with all of that. I think you should take damage from your own missed attacks as you hit yourself trying to get them off you. This is real life stuff, Fred. I know what you're talking about, but we're not going to go there. Trapdoor spiders and other ambush spiders can move at very fast speeds. This is why I'm very tempted to make the spider swarm do a bit more damage, just 1 point more, and give it a better to hit chance, and probably wind up giving it a better armor class just because of its speed, just because of the speed that they move. But we'll see how people feel about that. I think we're just about ready to deal with our swarm of centipedes. And yeah, if you guys have got anything you want to say about the spider, let me know. Should the swarm of spiders be more dangerous? So here's the thing. If we move those numbers by just 1 point to hit and damage, it's not going to matter. It's not going to have a significant effect on the game. It won't change the challenge rating at all, because it's really just 1 point that we're moving it by. So yeah, something to consider. All right, so let's go back to here. I've got that lined up. Let's deal with our next swarm. And we should be, so that's the spiders. Let's do the next one, which is not the flying one, but the standard one, and I can do the centipede because that's pretty simple then. Yeah, here we go. Swarm of centipedes. Oops. That's piercing damage though, isn't it? Piercing damage. Oh yeah, I had to make sure I put that back to poison damage, because it should be poison damage. Copy. That's our swarm of insects. Swarm of wasps. Swarm of wasps. Yep. Swarm of spiders. Are we right? Swarm of spiders. And then we're into swarm of centipedes. Oops, I've gone and taken all of the formatting out. Don't want to do that. Okay, formatting is back in. And then we do centipedes. Okay, centipedes. Oops, centipedes. Okay, there we go. All right, so a couple of questions we need to ask. I don't think fire, they should be vulnerable to fire. I still want them to be vulnerable to being squashed or bludgeoning damage, so I'm going to leave that. Piercing and slashing damage, I don't think that's a factor. I think we can leave them alone. I think you can kill a centipede by knocking out, cutting it in half, but I can't remember exactly. Our speed at armor class, okay, so we'll go down, we'll go down, we'll go down. That's all fine. We just need to change that into poison damage. And I believe, yep. And we added another line as well. So poison damage, poison damage, poison damage. Do I get it all? Come on. Poison damage. Okay. And right, so that's fine. I'm happy with that. Moving up. Very, very small change. Not really an awful lot going on here. Now we have a creature reduced to 0 hit points by a swarm of centipedes, is stable but poisoned for 1 hour, and even after regaining hit points and paralyzed while poisoned in this way. And that's rather complicated little bit of mechanics there. So see if we can simplify it. I don't know if we can, but maybe we can. Paste it. A creature reduced to 0 hit points by a swarm of centipedes is stable, but poisoned for 1 hour. Okay. So they've put a time frame on it. Even after regaining hit points and paralyzed while poisoned in this way. Okay. So we need to think in terms of, if we're doing this, is there a way of making this incorporate paralysis in some way? And I don't know that this is the best way to do it. I am tempted to say that we take the approach of the spider, which is poison condition, and the same, I think we did this with the wasp as well. Just to keep it simplified. So we go here, copy, go down to our centipede, and go paste. The target also has the poisoned and paralyzed condition. Paralyzed. Paralyzed condition. Which means paralyzed, I think that's fine, okay, that's right. So, and let's get rid of this condition. It's not as bad as a spider, like you just don't know how long it's going to last. My understanding is that the effect of centipedes does wear off after a time. How poisonous are centipedes? How poisonous are centipedes? Okay, centipede venom is typically not dangerous to humans, and most bites are more painful than life-threatening. However, there are some potential side effects, and you should seek medical help if you experience an allergic reaction or signs of infection. Pain. The bite can be painful, especially from larger centipedes. Pain can cause for several days. The area around it may swell. Okay, all right. Side effects of centipedes are mild pain and swelling. To avoid bites. So I don't know that we need to even look at paralysis. Why have they gone with this? Allergic reaction. A severe allergic reaction. Call anything. Yes, blah, 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 blah. This is for an allergic reaction. So I don't know that it's necessary. So I think what we'll do is we'll look at this stat block for the centipede and say, okay, this is unnecessary. It's not really going to paralyze you. It's not as bad as all that. It's not as bad as a spider bite. The target has the poison condition. Get rid of the paralysis. And how long? I mean, spider bites, particularly for a huntsman, was like pretty bad. Like it's not good. You really want to get some anti-venom into you, otherwise you're not going to make it. I think we say it's less poisonous than a spider. Okay, the target also has the poison condition for 1 hour. So that represents that it's just not quite as bad as the spider, whereas the poison condition for the spider is just not gone. It's still in there. You're going to have to do something about it. I think that's probably a better way of looking at it. And then, am I happy with all of this? Okay, how fast? That's another factor to consider, right? How fast is a centipede? How fast? Centipedes can move quickly, reaching speeds of up to 1.3 feet per second. This is comparable to the speed of a spider. Yeah, but that's a slow spider. Centipedes are able to move so fast because of their many segmented legs, blah, blah, blah. How centipedes is the fastest moving centipede and can run up walls, floors, and ceilings. How centipedes are beneficial because of blah, 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 so they can go up. And that's a good point. They do actually have the ability to climb. And I don't think the stat block represents that, does it? It's got swarm, but it doesn't have anything that allows it to climb up a wall. And that would be sensible to have. Spider climb. I think we should include this. I think, can it go on ceilings? I don't know. Ceilings, coating. We're almost out of time. Floor, ceiling. It does say ceilings. So I think spider climb for this is actually probably very appropriate. Why do centipedes run towards you? Are centipedes slow moving? Hit speed. Let's move slowly and burrow. While most people have blah. What is the fastest centipede in the world? That's an interesting one. That would be the dangerous one, right? House centipede. Sex, blade, fast moving centipedes in the world. Okay. Which is faster, a millipede or a centipede? Can centipedes run fast? Can centipedes enter an area? Whoa, there's some bad questions here. So, house centipede is supposed to be the fastest. How fast are house centipedes? Inches, second. It's not really helping me. Runs across floors and along ceilings. D. Okay. All right. So we're having to be very general about this. I think we have established that its sting should not be as bad. But I do feel like, just like the spider, it should be able to go up walls and along ceilings. It doesn't have web sense, doesn't have web walk, but it should have something like this. So we're going to go copy, go down to our centipede swarm, and we'll include that so that it's more fitting with the creature. So now you can have it in places that are generally not very helpful for the players. And that's probably more appropriate in terms of being it's only a slight change. It's not a huge change. This is one creature where I'd be tempted to drop down the dexterity of the monster, because I just don't think that it's quite as quick as a spider or the wasp. And yeah, I think I'll do that. I think I will actually make this a little bit slower. So there'll be a slight difference to this one. 2. That'll make a 12. It doesn't change anything else. It does change damage output. Bludgeoning, that's fine. That's that. This means that it's not really going to hit as often. It also means it's not going to do quite as much damage as well, because that's only a 2. And that is only a 2. So that would be a 4. So not quite as much damage. And that would be a 3, 2, 7. Am I all right with that? Let me just think a little bit where I'm just trimming. Is it going to change the challenge rating of this? No, it's not really going to. Moving the 2 hit by 1 point is not enough to warrant freaking out about. But I do feel like it needs to have a distinction from the spider and the wasp. Where spiders and wasps are a lot faster, centipede would not be quite as quick. It's got natural armor. We can actually leave that just because of its centipede armor. So the armor class could be still a 13. It doesn't have to be a 12, even with the dexterity of a plus 2 being there. So we've got natural armor there. The others don't actually have natural armor. They're actually based on their speed, aren't they? So that would actually be, that would be natural armor. And then spider would not have natural armor because it's based off its speed. So we'd get rid of this. And let's make that a 14. I'm going to make that change that I was talking about before, because I feel like the spider is much more dangerous. Be 18 plus 4. Does that change anything else? No, no, no. We're not going to have natural armor with this. We go down, that means that our to hit is going to change, but it doesn't change anything else, does it? It does mean that changes this, so that would go to a 4, so a little bit more dangerous, so that's a 6. This presses this to a 4, which means that's a 9. Yep, 9. And then this makes it a 6 to hit, which is a little bit better, but it should really have been a 5. We can go either way, from a 5 down to a 4 up to a 6, and it's still be in the same challenge rating. But I would say the spider is still probably a little bit more dangerous. And then I go over to here, and to the wasp. It does not have natural armor. It's actually just got an armor class of 13. That's fine. And our numbers are fairly close to where they needed to be, without screwing anything up too badly. And I think that might be it. I think we might be done. I think we've got all our various things that they would need determined. Am I pretty happy with that? Spiders climb. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably about right on where we needed to be. Let's just close this up. Don't need that. I need to go over here, back to chat, see what people have to say, and we'll finalize and just go over what changes I made. A brown recluse spider can have major negative health effects for the rest of your life after one bite. Yeah, this has happened with a lot of spiders. That's why I think that, being stung by a wasp is one thing. I mean, they can kill you depending on what sort of bee or wasp you're dealing with, but spiders, a swarm of spiders, I feel like, is a little bit more dangerous. That 1 point change is not dramatic, that I think it would cause too many problems. We're really going to be sitting about the same place as we were before, so it should be fine. Okay, let me go over the stat block very quickly with people, and just point out any changes that I have made, and then we're done. So yeah, we'll put the hat on, I guess. I need to have a haircut, I know. Yeah, I think this is about right. I think this is where we needed to be. So back to here, and swarm of insects. So we have changed a few things. Okay. All right. And there. Here we go. So what I changed to the swarm of insects. So remastering the swarm of insects, I made very few changes to the general stat block for the swarm of insects. What I've done here is I've pushed its armor class up to a 13 rather than a 12, because it's a challenge rating half, and 13 is about probably as low as you want to go, but you can go as low as 12. It could be that if you wanted to. But I wanted to work off the other swarms that I thought were important. I think the beetle is a complete waste of your time. The centipede, the wasp, and the spider are more interesting. The hit points were too low. I've gone for 78, which gives you an average of 31, or 56. I would suggest using 56 if you're using a group or have a group of experienced people. I did not change the speed. I did change the dexterity. It was a lot lower. I've pushed it up to a 16, giving it a +3. I've taken the bludgeoning damage resistance and made that a vulnerability. Piercing and slashing, fine with that being resistance. Condition immunities, I did change. I did remove some of the condition immunities, specifically petrification, and I just don't think that it needs to be there, and so I've taken that out. Petrification should work on pretty much anything. Everything else there was the same. Swarm effect is the same. Its bite was way too low in terms of to hit. It was only a +3, so I've gone to a +5, and its damage output has been adjusted. It's actually gone down to an 8 on average, which is 2d4 +3, or if it's reduced to half its hit points, it's 1d4 plus 3, which is still the same as it was before. The average comes out as 5. That's all right. Now the Wasp, what I've looked at doing with the Wasp is I've looked at more in terms of giving out poison damage rather than piercing damage, because I think that's what the Wasp is doing. It's poison damage and the poison condition. The Swarm of Spiders was a little bit different. I actually made them more dangerous by giving them a dexterity of 16, which is plus 4 modifier. The armor class goes up to a 14 rather than 13. Their hit points are exactly the same. And then what I did is I changed how they do damage. So now it's a plus 6 to hit for the Swarm of Spiders, and they're doing 9 points on average, which is 2d4 plus 4 poison damage, and 6 on average if they're reduced to half, and it's the poison condition, and there's no timer on that, it's just the poison condition. The Swarm of Centipedes I actually made reasonably strong, so I've given them natural armor, which the spiders and the wasps don't have, and so they've got an armor class of 13 still. Their dexterity is lower. I've pushed that down to a 14 with a plus 2, and bludgeoning damage is vulnerable. I think that makes sense. And then I've looked at the way that the creature moves and operates. It should be able to go up and use spider climb up walls and on ceilings. That's how a centipede operates. So its bite is a little bit different. It's a plus 4 to hit rather than a plus 3. Okay, to do damage, you're doing an average of about 7, which is 2d4 plus 2 poison damage. Or if it's reduced to half, you're doing 1d4 plus 2, which is an average of 4. And it's the poison condition is imposed, but only for 1 hour. It's not as bad as the spiders or even the wasps. And there you go. We've done the swarm of insects just like that. So yes, a few changes. I will put this up onto Patreon when I get a chance, probably near the end of the week, for those of you who are interested. And yeah, hopefully this was what you were looking for, Derp. If you're still here, you might be busy doing other things, but I think that's a good way of making the challenge rating 1/2 more interesting. So now each swarm is a little bit more different than the other. They're not hugely or widely different, so they should still work perfectly fine within those challenge ratings. A more interesting swarm for 1/2 CR, I can see making higher CR level swarms. Yes, absolutely, and you'll have to do that yourselves when you do your homebrew, Dungeon Masters and Game Masters, for sure. So yeah, that worked out pretty well. I'm pretty happy with that, and they feel distinct from each other. They feel a lot different than just being, okay, they move differently and that's it. Because that's kind of what we'd had before, is they just move differently. So do you think the Swarm of Insects stat block needs fixing for Dungeons & Dragons 5e? Yes. 72% out of 11 votes. No. 9%. Undecided 9%. And just watching 9%. Okay. Well, I think it did need a little bit of a change. I don't think it was a lot. I didn't change a lot. I changed very, very little. There's not a huge adjustment to things. They're just little tweaks. Just little tweaks. But play testing will be the proper test, right? When you really know if it works or not. Anyway, thank you to everybody who's been watching and listening. Huge thank you to all of my patrons who support me on Patreon. I really do appreciate it. Like I said, I'll put this off onto Patreon at the end of the week when I finish my working week. Thank you for taking part in the poll, those of you who did. And those of you in chat specifically who have been providing feedback and ideas. Fred Hoover, Matthew, Overboard, Derp, Negative Space, Nacho Man, Peter, thank you so much for your input. Even if I didn't take it on board, I was paying attention, okay? I was paying attention. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, or the night, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours, and hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.